All right, you ready?
Ready?
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Perpetual Chess. And to anyone watching on our guest's channel, I say hello. I'm not super used to being on video, although I do it for Chessable's How to Chess show. So you'll get a lot of me staring at an outline, but happy to welcome newer viewers. So Perpetual Chess, of course, long form interview show, and we're interviewing one of the chess YouTube OGs, originators this week. He's a FIDE candidate master, longtime chess YouTuber, been making videos since 2007. He's known on YouTube, of course, as Kingscrusher. He was one of the most popular chess YouTubes in the world for many years and is still going strong with 114,000 subs last I checked. He's also a computer programmer and the webmaster of the popular site chessworld.net, a site he's been running for well over a decade. Our guest also created the most popular chess course on Udemy, which is called The Complete Guide to Chess Tactics, and has a bunch of other courses on there. And he's a bullet, self-confessed bullet addict slash specialist who recently achieved his highest lead chess bullet rating at the age of 50. So
Yes.
without further ado, let's welcome him to the show. Trifon Gavriel, aka Kingscrusher. How are you?
Fine, good. Yes. I recently had my 50th birthday, and I was pleased that my bullet abilities are still there. Yeah, I think it's like a good test of the brain function if I've still got my speed. So I'm quite happy with bullet chess at the moment.
That's amazing to hear. Yeah, and it's great that you celebrate these things. Now, one thing I can't help but wonder, hearing you say that you're 50, Trifon, here in the U.S., that qualifies you for a bunch of senior tournaments. Is that the case in the UK as well?
Yes, I will be looking out for them, actually, now that you mention it. Yeah, I think I'll be on the lookout for that, especially if the situation with the COVID settles down a bit. I've had my vaccines. I think I might be eligible for a booster as well. So I think I need to be a bit more reassured, but before going out into the over the board bowl, because it's quite a lot of people sometimes at a tournament. I don't know if I'm that comfortable doing over the board chess at the moment. It's usually online chess I prefer at the moment.
Yeah, understandable. But sooner or later, hopefully, we'll get this sorted, this pesky pandemic, and then yeah, it's something cool. One of the good things about turning 50, I'm 44, and I'm already starting to think about it. So you'll have to give me the scouting report. But Trifon, and I'm sorry, I know you already told me. I just think of you of Kingscrusher. So you, before we started recording, you gave me the correct pronunciation of your first name, but I have a
Oh,
feeling I'm bungling it. Can you say
just
it
call me
again?
Trifle if you want. I don't mind Trifon, Trifle. Well, no, Trifon's good or Trifon's
Trifon.
good. Either actually, I'm not really that bothered actually. But the Greek is Trifonas because my parents are from Cyprus originally. So I was born in England, but yeah, it's like an ancient Greek saint's name. There's actually a St. Trifon's Day, so Trifon Costas Gavriel
Okay, all
is
right,
my true
not
name.
as bad as I feared, but anyway, it just my apologies. Not the first name I mispronounced.
Don't
Now,
worry about it.
now, Mr. Kingscrusher, what I would like to start with, of course, is your YouTube career. I mean, it's been amazing. I mean, 2007. I know it's been, obviously well over a decade, but it feels like a century to me, and it's hard to imagine the beginnings of chess YouTube then. So I checked out your first couple of videos. One was, I mean, of course, I've been aware of you for a long time, but in preparation for this interview, I went back in the annals, and your first one was like sort of live footage from a club, but then your first real video was showing a game. Take us back to what you remember about that. What was your thought process putting something like that online in those days?
I have to give credit to Majnu of 2006. He did a video with a normal video recorder for recording the screen. There wasn't the software like nowadays. Nowadays, I use something called XSplit. But yeah, I did find this Microsoft Windows encoder software, though, from Microsoft. So I didn't have to use like a video recorder. I used Microsoft encoder, and that seemed quite good. And yeah, I had experiments with it, on his encouragement. So I did some videos, and I thought it could actually be good, promotionally for Chess World to do some videos. And uh, I was originally just, thinking of just doing master games. I think I did an early Fischer game the one where Fischer did Queen takes F4 check, I think, with this
Yep.
this Queen sat with
Yeah, famous queen sacrifice. Yeah.
yeah, and then I think Roby Chess. I saw Roby Chess doing this live commentary. I thought, hang on, I kind of like doing live commentary. The idea, so I did quite a lot of live commentary videos, and people seem to really enjoy them. The ICC was the dominant server at that time, so you had to do like Telnet Windows. So I mean, it's still a good server, of course, but the web browsers, seem more convenient to me now. I usually use web browser servers now, but back in the day, Telnet, ICC, and I was like starting to record, sometimes 2 or 3 games each day, and do some sort of post-mortem analysis as well. And actually, people have been saying for me to get back into to do that, but I've had other sort of adventures and activities actually. But that is good component. I do prefer like the tournament format, like these bullet tournaments or super blitz is one of my favorite time controls actually nowadays, rather than 5 minute. I think I prefer 3 minute. It's sort of a mix between bullet and 5 minute. But yeah, that's
Yeah, it serves people's short attention spans. 3 minutes seems to be the way the wind is blowing. And when you started making these videos, were people watching right away, or was it just sort of like a trickle at the beginning?
Uh, it did seem to grow. I think YouTube actually, this as it was documented recently. I've seen this a few documentary videos by Veritasium actually. Originally, the YouTube algorithm favored you accumulating subscribers, and everyone would be notified originally in the first few years of YouTube. So your subscriber base would help you get more and more views basically on each video. But I think YouTube changed their algorithm at some point with at the time of Google Plus, and it was more about you had to do more attractive video thumbnails and descriptions because they wouldn't necessarily notify all your subscribers. So there has been some YouTube algorithm changes along the way, but when the algorithm was just more kind of straightforward that they did notify all the subscribers, I was definitely seeing increases and increases and increases. But I think YouTube itself is under pressure to compete with other platforms. Everyone's trying to get our eyeballs now. It's been called the attention war. This like Netflix, Facebook, they're all trying to get our attention. And I think YouTube changed their algorithm. I kind of know from this course I went, this official YouTube course, that they were going to measure watch time. So it's not just if you do a good video, you've got to get your audience to watch other videos. They'll take the total watch time and then they'll prioritize you in their algorithm. So it's all quite aggressive nowadays for watch time. This kind of view time war that's going on. I think Netflix is also in the mix now. So YouTube has got a lot of competitors for our eyeballs. But yeah, when the algorithm was more straightforward, it was easier to build up views, and it's kind of there's more emphasis I think now on the thumbnails and the sort of more clickbaity descriptions and stuff to get the algorithm to be excited to send it even to your own subscribers. The algorithm's got to
Right.
think, it does a sample, and then based on that sample, it will send it to your subscribers. So it's a bit, it's all about watch time. I think nowadays it's more changed. The
Yeah,
algorithm is a bit
it's
harder.
fascinating to. I mean, I'm sure it's extremely advanced right now. I know there are sort of professions built around helping people sort of up it, but I'm curious when you were getting started, like so it was more, as you say, it was a sort of pure system where um, if if people were responding, it would be sent to more people. But did you feel like people were responding right away, or was it initially just sort of like, all right, this is kind of a lost leader for chessworld.net, but it's fun and I love chess, so I'll keep doing it?
I think it was right away, but also there was even on the chess servers there was far less no suppliers of chess servers, so there were lots of people also joining straight from YouTube to go to the chess server as well. So it was a time of high traffic because there weren't so many suppliers. So yeah,
Okay.
it was a very interesting time. And one thing I did feel, for me, it was a personal gap that although I was doing well with Chess World, I really wanted people to chat about games. So I was really quite excited to get this kind of community chat going around historical games. I really kind of like that as well. It's like very interesting to get this kind of community going on YouTube as well as Chess World. Because Chess World, most people just generally log in, play their moves, correspondence moves, and then log out. So people chatting on games is a bit rare, but because YouTube, like chessgames.com, is because it's that purpose. You get the audience fully focused on that purpose. So like at chessgames.com, there's a lot of kibitzing every day, but YouTube is also like the primary goal for kibitz, for commenting, and so that was a very, very nice need that I personally had. I like people chatting about chess, so that was really kind of nice to have that YouTube as well as Chess World going, and I still enjoy it. I really enjoy that as well now.
Makes sense. And you mentioned, of course, the chess servers. And as you mentioned, ICC, which stands for Internet Chess Club, was kind of the industry leader at the time. So the fact that you were funneling sort of traffic to them in addition to your own site, were you getting early sponsorship deals, or was it just the ad revenue from YouTube, which I know isn't like, especially in those days, wasn't like amazing?
I wasn't really that strict about um, because I felt they're like real time chess anyway, and I'm doing correspondence, so it wasn't really a direct sort of competitor. I just thought it would be a good addition to the YouTube channel content without any major conflict of interest for me. So no, I wasn't sponsored by them or anything. No, it's just. But eventually, I did do some shows for them. Eventually, in later years, that was fun. So
Cool.
yeah, but it was the auto pairing of ICC is especially good to meet titled players, a very, very strong grandmaster sometimes. So yeah, it's it's a great site, still is, but the browser base, I think people, more modern consumers, they want convenience, they want minimal hassle nowadays for things. So that's the way I think the world at the moment, just taking out the
Yeah.
hassle.
Yeah, with the auto pairing, what Trifon is referring to is, believe it or not, listeners and viewers, in the old days, you had to sort of like seek a certain game in a certain rating range, and then like the person would have to like manually look to see if they fit the criteria. Whereas now there's what they call rating pools, where you just hit 3 minute on chess.com or Lee Chess and or ICC, and it finds you a game. Fascinating. How far we have come. Now, Trifon, of course, you've got this background as a computer programmer, and you made your site, chessworld.net. Were you doing chess full time already in these days, like 2007, or were you doing other programming on the side?
Um, I did work in industry, so my degree is computing and business. So I started off with quite quite an intense IT consultancy. I was working every day of the week. I remember getting electrocuted one weekend with one of the
Oh
machines,
my
these big
goodness.
machines. So that wasn't. Then I worked for another company. I worked for finance, and then there was this merger, and I had this opportunity. Do I want to set up my own company, or do I want to work in another sort of finance company? And I thought, hang on, this is a good opportunity to see if I can set up my own company. So I did set up Chess World, but I had been programming some of the checkmate detection while I was still working for this finance company. I had these emails. Hang on, it's not registering checkmate here. So I did have bugs but eventually I managed to sort out checkmate detection, and yeah, it's people did seem to want to pay. The annual fee I was charging, it's not much, and and I have been doing Chess World ever since. I haven't needed to go and work in IT. I do prefer being self-employed. I don't particularly like going on the London Underground and all the hassle of getting up early and having to work late. And sometimes there's an image of conscientious. You don't need that if you're self-employed. So I kind of like doing my own thing. And my brother's also, an IT person, self-employed, and my family generally, they had a clothing business, Mary Gavriel in London, and that was very, very successful. So the entrepreneurial spirit to do our own companies was kind of, I think it's like encouraged in my family. But anyway, I have sort of seen a few industries. I've, IT consultancy, manufacturing. I worked at Dexion, and I worked at UBS in finance in the city. So I've seen that. I've seen mergers, and it was very, very interesting. But I've never been, by the way, a professional chess player. I always thought I was going to be a programmer, but in later years, I set up Chess World, and it's been fun ever since. Really, it flies by when you're having fun, as they say. It has been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed Chess World, and
Yeah, go ahead.
the ICC community. I don't know if you remember, there was this book by Sarah Hurst, Chess on the Web, but the ICC I thought was totally out of my reach to program anything like the ICC, but I did know databases from my work in IT. So I was good at databases. And my brother said, my brother Nick one day said, you could store a position in a database. I thought, hold on, does that mean I could do correspondence chess? Because in correspondence chess, you just need to like store the positions. So you can have like 200 games and you just store like the latest possession and the PGN. And that was within my capabilities rather than real-time chess. So my technology skill set did seem to match up with being able to program chess world. It's more about the database side of things. And I could just about do the wiring needed. So the legal moves and all the stuff, and it grew. The tournaments. There's tournaments, knockout tournaments, pyramids, uh, and other quite interesting features at Chess World, which people seem to appreciate.
Amazing stuff. Yeah, you're a true pioneer. So when was your last non-chess job? When did you switch to doing your content creation and Chess World full time?
Non-chess job. The last was when I was working at UBS, and actually when I was there at UBS, I did actually play someone who beat me in one of the games I was playing. I was playing quite a few people, and it sort of helped test the early chess world. And I actually annotated that game actually on Chess World, because Chess World also has this annotated games area. It's quite so. Yeah, that was my last thing, just working in the city in a big finance company.
So what year do you think that was?
Actually, I don't know now. Actually,
Yeah.
I think it was when
Well,
I first started
let's
Chess World.
tackle it this way. Your first video was 2007. I'm guessing it was after your first video.
A few years before that, I think
Oh wow.
YouTube was like 2 years later, or so. A few years later, I was in YouTube. This guy Majnu 2006, an early Chess World member, mentioned about YouTube. So, yeah, 2 years, yeah, sometime later, I got into YouTube.
Okay. And before we move to other topics, Trifon, I want to give a quick shout out to a friend of the pod, chess.com, Sam Copeland. I don't know if you've seen his time lapse videos of the most popular chess YouTubers over time.
All right,
Uh,
yes.
Yeah, those are amazing. So of course I watched a couple times to sort of take a trip down memory lane and prepare for the video. So it looked like, from 2007 when you launched to say 2014, um, before the Agadmaters and Levy Rosmans
Oh,
and
yeah.
people started to emerge, it looked like you were near the top. Jerry from Chess Network has been at it forever. The chess website, Mato Jelic, the Canadian guy who streams his games, whose name you said something Roby. I'm sorry, I forgot it already.
There was J Roby Chess. There was Majdu 2006. There was there was quite a few. Green Castle block. Yeah, there was quite a few interesting challenges. There was even this, I think, this Icelandic GM who specialised in 3-minute chess. He was playing a reverse Dutch Leningrad. I think, he had a pet system. There were some strong players around at the time. It was a very, very interesting time, definitely
And
for
did
YouTube.
you consider yourself competitive with these other chess YouTubers? Would you be like trying to be the number one or top three or whatever it might be in those days?
I'm I think I like views as long as my videos got a few comments. So I think I didn't mind because my main as far as income anyway, chess world. So it was just a bit of it's still a bit of a hobby on the side, to do videos. It's a bit of fun, maybe a bit of marketing, but I did find that the Google AdWords actually was the big thing to do marketing. Google AdWords
Yeah.
was very, very strong, more than 10 years ago. And there was this time when the YouTube members actually exceeded what I was paying with Google AdWords. So there's this time when your work in social media could actually be stronger than the paid marketing you do to Google AdWords. So I remember that time, this very strange transition time. And so I was feeling like one of my admins was saying, "Oh, I'm wasting a lot of time on YouTube. I could just be, But it was actually good marketing time in the end, and also a little bit of income started accumulating on YouTube. So it was like you're putting in the work, you're getting a bit of separate income, and you're also like marketing, my chess world. So it seemed to be two birds with one stone. And also, I did like the comments, on games and stuff, and So it was very beneficial to get into YouTube. It was definitely a very, very important marketing tool. It started to be more powerful than Google AdWords. So that was very interesting as well.
That's interesting. Yeah. So you build a sort of a flywheel that supports itself, and still doing it to this day. But Trifon, I want to get into. Of course, you've made so many chess sort of history videos, so many famous games, and I know that you're a particular fan of Fischer and Tal and Morphy. So I want to kind of dive into those players and chess improvement. But first, Trifon, we're going to take a break and hear from our sponsors. Okay, and we are back. And Trifon, so here on Perpetual Chess, supporters of the podcast can submit questions for our esteemed guests, and we've got a few good ones for you. So my first question is from Mark Miller. So Mark Miller, thanks for helping to support Perpetual Chess. And Mark wrote in to say, Trifon, your interest in and coverage of Bobby Fischer has been remarkable. Have you read John Donaldson's works on Fischer? And given your mutual interest, have you ever had any correspondence or conversations with him about Fischer?
I've got an Audible book and other Fischer books, actually by Brady. Sorry, my Fischer book here is by Brady, actually.
Endgame, right? Or Profile of a Prodigy?
Just Bobby Fischer. Yeah. But no, I'm not entirely sure about
Donaldson's book. It's definitely worth checking out. It came out about last year. And I should mention, by the way, Trifon's two most popular videos of all time are both about Bobby Fischer, the game of the century and Fischer Petrosian.
But I have to tell you something funny about the Fischer Petrosian. I was a bit because Petrosian is also one of my favorite players because I think he's quite peculiar. He hated losing, and I think we're privileged now to be able to select Petrosian's wins. But I think other people at the time probably were not amazed by Petrosian because he would draw a lot of time compared to Spassky, which was good for winning. The place for the World Championship. But Petrosian's always fascinated me as well. And I kind of went into an overkill mode. This is quite funny because I definitely did a lot more analysis than I normally would. And I think I drove the YouTube algorithm nuts because actually I did get a lot of people saying, you've done too much analysis. There are too many variations here. But it ended up strangely driving the YouTube algorithm completely berserk. So it was getting more and more shown in YouTube, and I was getting more and more kind of comments about how I did an overkill analysis. So it doesn't really work how you kind of anticipate. It started with, okay, I wanted to do this game, but I kind of overdid the game. But yeah, you can sometimes, it's about, I didn't mean to. It just shows there is an underlying algorithm. You can sometimes, even without knowing it, you can excite the algorithm for the wrong reasons sometimes. So a lot of my Fischer games, they're much briefer, the analysis, and more to the point. And that was just a draw as well. So at the end of this big analysis, it's just a draw as well.
Right.
Nowadays, I don't even cover draws. I like covering decisive games. And my preference now is actually for shorter games right now because it means a shorter video. And I think I have more of a feeling that I don't want to sort of burden this onus of seeing a huge video. And people sometimes only have a few minutes. And so I can appreciate, I think I prefer videos to be like 10 to 15 minutes now. But at the time, I just went overboard and it accidentally drove the algorithm nuts.
So by driving it nuts, you mean it promoted it in a lot of places, and that's part of why it has so many views?
Yeah, because of all the comments, which weren't particularly great comments. So that was a funny case. But there are, I noticed other strange algorithmic effects. I noticed at one point, if you used, some word like outrageous, it would also kind of drive the algorithm nuts, or secret. And yeah, there's a lot about playing the algorithm, but I think I prefer not to play any algorithms because in an extreme case, and this is ridiculous, Cora, I noticed that it promotes the bigger answers, and it's not good at the end of the day just to be playing algorithms because you could pad out these answers with lots of positions, but why would you want to at the end of the day? I think the purer thing for me is you want to add value to yourself and other people. You don't want to be playing algorithms. That's my point of view now. So I'm very happy with the Lead Chess blogs because you can quickly show a game, not diagram by diagram, quickly show a game and the insights, and it's good for you and it's good for other people. And that's also why I like doing courses at Udemy, because I want to go for a few games for myself as much as anything each day, not just one game and then having to market this thing and package it and all that. I just want to add value either to myself or people watching. I don't want to be playing algorithms, but I did notice sometimes these algorithmic effects, sometimes completely unintended.
That's funny.
Completely unintended.
Yeah, yeah, it's a constant struggle for creators. Do you try to please the algorithms or just make what you think is good content? And trying to strike that balance is always challenging. Now, you mentioned the Lead Chess blogs. That's something we should give a shout out to, because obviously Lead Chess, amazing free website, as everyone watching and listening knows. But they may not have caught this new feature because I think it was only launched within the last month. Basically, just an easy way for a chess player to write a blog post and embed a video. And Trifon's been going hard on the YouTube, on the Lead Chess blog, posting frequently. So, what drove you to start doing this? It seems like you're busy already with your content. Why did you decide to embrace this new way of sharing?
I thought I should give it an experiment to see what happens. And then I started noticing, hold on a sec. This is a good promotion tool. And also I started, it's allowed to put videos as well. And I've realized, I mean, this is very, very new, that it also drives some traffic to some old videos. So I've got these thousands of videos lying there. And I did, check, and it does seem to promote old videos. So I probably don't even need to do any more YouTube videos. I could just talk about some of my old classic videos. So that's another thing for any YouTubers listening, that if you do a blog, you can include a video and talk about the game. And you can do a study as well and include that and put the analysis, and it makes a nice package. So you can have study, video, commentary around it. It makes a nice, like when you go to an exhibition, you've got the artifacts which are neatly kind of annotated and packaged. It's a blog post really can encapsulate well a lot of media. I do think it's a fantastic medium. If you've already got content elsewhere or videos, I think I would recommend checking out the Lead Chess blog. And Feeble is a really one of the best programmers and nicest persons I've ever met, online in my life. He's really responsive to any changes and stuff. He's a brilliant guy.
Yeah. Shout out. You're talking about Thibaut, I assume.
Oh,
Thibaut Du's voices.
yeah.
Yeah, just amazing. Just an
Amazing.
incredible product. So let's bring it back to Fischer and Morphy. So where does your fandom? I mean, it's any chess fan. It's not hard to guess how you might become like devoted to them. But what is it about Fischer and Morphy and Tal that makes them sort of your favorite player, and to have made so much, or amongst your favorite players, and to have made so much content about them, Trifon?
Well, I think there's two sets of world champions, very broadly speaking, the dynamic, aggressive, tactical world champions and the more kind of static, positional world champions. And Morphy, as an unofficial world champion, strikes me, very, very strong, tactical, dynamic, aggressive, and could even give odds games, could even play blindfold simultaneouses. His tactics and combinations are absolutely, out of this world. And also, I think there's an underlying win probability drive to both Morphy and Fischer. They will sometimes, if they're losing, and Morphy can be losing because he's given odds of rook and knight, they will find ways and means of creating win probability. And that is also a fascinating thing. Fischer might, play on and grind people down, even fellow US grandmasters, when playing in another country. They have to suffer 3 adjournments against Fischer. Fischer's not going to give them a draw, and he carries on to try and get that win probability. So that will to win, I think, is evident in both. And but Tal for me is the bigger kind of chess enthusiast. Up until a month before he died, he apparently, he left a hospital bed to go and play Kasparov in this Blitz tournament and beat Kasparov.
Yeah.
Just exactly like 30 days before, his death. He played until the very end, and you could see him on the FIDE, rating lists, which are online, that he was generally in the top 10 and 20, even 20 years after 1960. So for me, the biggest like lover of the game, independent of winning or losing, just to create, be involved in chess, is Mikhail Tal, I think. So I think I'm more in love with Tal since working on Tal in the last few weeks than ever before. And also, he was a good friend of Desmetanov, and they had the similar sort of dynamic, creative style. And Bronstein, I consider there's this certain group that were very much chess enthusiasts as well. And Tal would play anyone, even if they weren't an official grandmaster in Blitz or whatever. So I think Tal's currently my favorite, but I love all of them. And Morphy, was so ahead of his peers. I think that contrast that he was so ahead makes it easier to see some opening principles if they're violated. What is the punishment for violating opening principles, like moving the same piece twice, like being materialistic? I started to see, a lot of Morphy's opponents, it's like their pieces literally haven't got out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
They're all on the back row, the king's in the center. So you start to see these things very clearly from the contrast in Morphy games between, because he was so much stronger than his peers. Unfortunately for Morphy, chess was seen as a form of gambling. I could understand, get some empathy that he didn't want to carry it on, and he failed this law practice to restart it or start it or restart it because people just came in and wanted to talk to him about the chess, it seems. So, yeah, for Morphy, unfortunately, he was too early for chess, I think.
Yeah, what stands out to me about Fischer and Morphy in particular, as you say, is how far ahead of their peers they were. I mean, Morphy to a greater extent, but I think at the time that Fischer, his brief peak, it was probably harder to do because players were so much stronger.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the dynamic style, Trifon, and I know that you kind of you like the tactical chess as well. When I recorded the 7 Deadly Chess Sins recap with David Franklin about Jonathan Rowson's book, you had messaged me and said that you had been playing around with a sort of safe style as a way to improve your game. Could you expound on that a little bit? I don't know if you remember this little experiment that you described to me online, but I'm curious to hear about it.
I think I was getting this inkling about win probability more and more. Actually, I think it was that. I think I was playing Mamedyarov in Blitz, and there's this option: do you play objectively, or he's low on time, so you factor the clock in as well. And I like try and keep the checks going, and play non-controversial moves sometimes. So I think you can have all the strategies in the world, but I think they're plugged into like win probability. Even the art of war. If you consider, one of my favorite philosophies is put yourself beyond defeat before going on to the attack. But in certain examples of Sun Tzu, he would like go on to the attack because he knew that the army is numerically bigger, so he's got to chip away at them. So it's all about the win. It's not about the strategies. The strategies are just a tool, a means to an end. And I think that shines through more and more when you see Morphy and Fischer. Like Fischer would sometimes against certain opponents avoid main opening theory because he knew his opponent would be a researcher and would know all of this and play something obscure. And in Blitz, Fischer would totally change his repertoire because he knows that against Tal, he should keep a really solid opening. He played some weird hybrid of G3 and the London system and beat Tal. So he knows about, to me, it seems their main thing is as simple as maximizing win probability. Anything, any strategies we fall in love with, I think they're always going to be subservient. If we want to be competitive, at least they're always going to be subservient to maximizing your probability of winning. So, on the faster time limits, just moving quickly can be the best strategy. So I think I see that more and more though. And Lasker, he was largely understood, not very understood, but I think he would factor in the psychology of opponents and adjust his play accordingly.
Yeah, famously. But that's interesting. So you feel like you're able to sort of incorporate that into your own sort of online game?
Yeah, on my stream template, I do actually put maximize win probabilities and tell people about it. It is one of my favorite. It's a blatantly obvious strategy. Basically, you want to win, and everything should be subsuming. But it's easy to sort of try and be, for example, too positional or too accurate. The clock is part of the game, especially in online chess and speed chess. That's also to be factored in. And sometimes I think Tal, with his complexity, drive, he would also recognize, look, people are human beings. I don't know if you know the hippopotamus story of Tal is quite funny.
I don't believe so.
Oh, right. Apparently, he'd spent 40 minutes, it looked as though he was calculating for 40 minutes, but apparently
Oh,
he
right.
was,
Go
thinking
on.
about
Sorry.
how to get a hippo out of a swamp.
Yeah, yeah.
And, and then I thought it was very, very interesting what he said, and after that, he realized when he came back to the board, he gave up because all of his engineering expertise, it failed him. He couldn't get this hippo out of the swamp. And he said, well, the nature of the problem here, it's intuitive. So, he just plays the knight sack anyway.
Right.
And to me, that is, sometimes chess isn't scientific. It is about winning. It's about psychology, and sometimes even complications can be a weapon for you to win games. If, as Tal says, if you lead your opponents to a deep dark forest where 2+2 is 5 and a path is only narrow enough for one, the complexity itself becomes a tool for maximizing winning probability. So if there's a trend for all three, they are warriors. It's a sport for them. They want to win as well. It's not just a scientific set of moves. It's against particular opponents in particular time limits, taking all the variables and seeing, what will win here in this situation.
Yeah, I had forgotten about that hippopotamus story. Of course, when the aforementioned Sam Copeland and I talked about my life in games on the podcast, we had mentioned that story. Just legendary stuff. Yeah. So we have a Patreon question sort of relating to this swashbuckling style, which is from Joe Salmon. Thanks for the support, Joe. And Joe asks, he says, what are your thoughts on the chess opening, the King's Gambit? He believes it's a favorite of yours. Do you think it will ever feature again at elite level standard time controls? And he mentions that Jan Nepomniachtchi did recently play it in an Armageddon game.
Well, Levin Aronian, I remember he was talking about the King's Gambit. The problem is there are so many things that Black can do to get a decent position. So your theoretical knowledge is stretched because there are just so many options Black has. But I remember a Super Grandmaster game, Michael Adams was defeated by Nakamura in a King's Gambit in a standard time control. So it can be dangerous. I think the more resourceful a Grandmaster is, the more they can make out of it. It is the best gambit as far as being able to get into it, because a lot of gambits you'll never actually get at the board. You might want to play the martial gambit, but people are going to throw anti-martial moves at you. So it is a kind of, I think it's our gateway into the romantic era of chess, just to play the King's Gambit. You're giving a nods up. It's a kind of nostalgic thing to play. And I did notice my King's Gambit playlist was more popular than a lot of my others. And I think basically, for me, it's got several features. Sometimes you get better central control. Sometimes you're using the rook, the default position of the rook when you castle on F1, it's automatically developed when you blast through. Sometimes you're causing fragmentation, structural fragmentation, and they're too greedy. It worked very well for Paul Morphy, and it also, Spassky beat Fischer with it, of course. And Nakamura's beaten Adams, but it's kind of heavy going if you want to be prepared for all the things that Black can do. I think that was Levin Aronian's point. There's just so much Black can do to potentially equalize or be slightly better sometimes.
Yeah, I don't think it's safe to say it will never be prominently featured at the elite level, but it raises an important point. Friend of the pod, Chris Callahan from the aforementioned Lee Chess, he's been sharing a few sort of a few nuggets on Twitter recently where he looks at different openings. And of course, on Lee Chess, you can filter for different ratings. So when you go to their opening explorer within the study feature, you can filter for 1600 rapid or whatever, which I think is around the level of a lot of listeners. And he's saying like a lot of the openings that you're told are bad perform quite well at that level. Like I remember he mentioned the Danish Gambit, and I don't remember the others that are mentioned, but I do just want to highlight the point that for listeners, particularly those rated say below 1600 FIDE, which would be, I don't know, 1900 Lichess Rapid or whatever it may be. Like just because some strong player tells you an opening is bad doesn't mean that you shouldn't play it. It's more important to look at your own results, and you can even look at the macro results through the Lichess Opening Explorer, because a lot of your opponents with this offbeat stuff will be less prepared. So lastly, of course, also throwing it back to my interview with Chris Callahan, like we're playing for fun. So if these openings are fun for you, like, you're not going to see the King's Gambit other than like a once in a blue moon surprise by Grandmaster Adiban or Nakamura at the top level. But that doesn't mean if you're enjoying it, you shouldn't play it.
Oh yes, I've absolutely felt that all the time. When I was doing all the Blitz games for the ICC, I'll play whatever I wanted, because one of my courses is the Fun Lover's Guide to chess openings. I've categorized openings into systems, normal openings, and gambits. And basically, I think there's a place for these three categories. A system is not necessarily bad. Some people say, well, you don't get exposure to different pawn structures if you play the London systems all the time. But the thing is, if you're not spending all those hours memorizing tons of sharp opening theory, you can spend your time on Tactics Trainer, play some system, get a decent position, and hope to be better than in your middle game and end game. Tactics pervade, middle game and end game. So sometimes I think people are memorizing all the theoretical openings, but it's like you can't take these games that you see super grandmasters playing in closed events for your repertoire, because it's totally different goals. For me, it's always about having fun first. So when you're playing online, the gambits often in a restricted time control, they make the position easier for you to play and easier for the opponent to blunder. Black Mardama Gambit, is a very dangerous gambit, on the faster time control. Smith-Morra Gambit, which Esserman's, got a book on, Mayhem and Morra. All these gambits are super fun, and especially the Smith-Morra, can you imagine all of those very heavily theoretically prepared Sicilian defense players? They get that. But in online Blitz, I've beaten loads of IMs and even GMs, I think, on occasion with the Smith-Morra Gambit. The time limit, the easiness to play, and the goal. You can't. It's like technology. I see the same in technology. People talk about these technologies that Netflix uses. It doesn't mean it's right for small companies. They haven't got millions of pounds to spend on the technology. You can't use things from a different context without really understanding where is that from. So when you see the super GMs playing a super solid Slav, and if you want online fun, you can play the King's Engine, the Benoni. You can play anything. I mean, I think for most enthusiasts, the goal is to have fun, not necessarily to become even a title player or world champion there. They just want to have fun. So I think your choice of openings, systems for me, give you more time to practice on your tactics training. Gambits for me let you experience more tactical positions, so you can actually use openings as a tool, for systems to get more time for study, for gambits to get those type of positions. But I don't think you need to copy the grandmasters. You just do whatever gives you the most fun. If you're not into becoming a grandmaster later, I think that's why I did this Fun Lover's Guide to Chess Openings, and it seems to be well received as well on Udemy.
That's great. Yeah. And I want to get more into your Udemy courses, Trifon, but first we're going to take one more break to hear from our sponsors. And we are back. And Trifon, so you've mentioned your Udemy courses. I know that one of your courses, I believe, is the best-selling chess course on Udemy, full stop. And I've got a Patreon question related to it, but first, could you walk us through how you started selling courses there? How did that come about?
This is going to sound very strange, but there is a magical book, and I thought it was all hype. There's a book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and it encourages you to work backwards from what you want. And I felt I was becoming a bit of a slave to YouTube, and I thought, hang on, I really want to maybe try my hand at courses. Maybe I do want to be a member for some courses. So you look ahead and you say, well, what do you want to achieve? And you kind of work backwards from that. And I thought, hang on, but I'm an instant gratification person. This is really hard. If you've been trained on YouTube, you're into instant gratification. You do a video, you get views, you get all this other stuff. It's very hard to do a course if you're into instant gratification. So one of the hard things is to accumulate and to be happy, sort of building a product rather than instantly delivering something just to get instant feedback like on YouTube. So there is a different mindset, but I do find it now much more rewarding to plot out a very nice structure in advance, and it's like you're attaching, videos. So I think of it like an armada of videos, and so with the tactics course, the kind of armada was set out. I already had a kind of paper on my Barnet Chess Club website years back, when it was all just HTML, and that was it. I Barnet's like the ICC at the time, but I could map out a structure, and I did manage to train myself a little bit, in recent months for delayed gratification. So building up a course, and I realized, your reputation's online. You've got to try and make it the best possible thing, you can possibly produce, because, your reputation's on the line. And so I made it quite chunky, more than 20 hours. And it's a lot of things I've been thinking about tactics over the years. Like I felt Kotov's Think Like a Grandmaster was more like Think Like a Computer with all the trees of variations. I thought, hang on, when I had some coachees, I was thinking, prioritize forcing moves. You look at downsides. That's one of my favorites. That even before you think tactically about something, that if no downsides of the opponent's position exists, say they haven't got a weakened king, say they haven't got a weakness here, say they haven't got an unprotected piece. If there's no downsides, there's probably no tactics. So I wanted a completely philosophically opposite approach to Kotov's Think Like Grandmaster, which is basically saying, look, we're humans. And I think Tao respects that as well. As humans, you really want to maximize your use of intuition and feeling, and not try and calculate like a computer, because a computer can completely outcalculate any human. In like a second, like a computer can see millions of positions. So I tried this human approach that I've kind of emphasized in that tactics course, which is, you start with downsides quite often, and you're trying to kind of celebrate those downsides. And then you prioritize forcing moves, basically because you want to make it as easy as possible to calculate, ahead. So things like prioritizing forcing moves, check all checks, captures and major threats like threat of mate in 1 and 2, that helps to prioritize forcing moves. And so that course philosophically is about our limitations as a human. What do we need to do to be good tactically? It's a bit of a magic trick that even like the most outrageous forcing moves, I think Cecil Purdy, the first correspondence world champion, he said that, to the same sort of effect. Even the most outrageous moves, if they're forcing in nature, it means you can calculate them more easily in advance. There's less branching. So yeah, I put it all together in that course. I love creating the structure, and I love like attaching videos after. It's a completely different delayed gratification experience to YouTube. And I did feel like I have to sacrifice like YouTube a little bit, but I've been getting back into YouTube more recently. But yeah, it's a completely different experience building a course. You've got to delay, gratification and build structure in. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun though. It's been very, very rewarding once you can get, a nice course put together eventually. Very rewarding.
That's great. Yeah. And you have several. And like you say, that the tactics guide, over 20 hours of content, which is crazy to me. So I want to dive into Jim Sadler's question. So first of all, Jim, thanks for supporting Perpetual Chess. And Jim wrote in to say that Trifon's Udemy tactics course is fantastic. It was the first chess learning resource I found online during lockdown last year, before I even knew Chessable existed. When calculating tactical sequences during a game, does Trifon have any tips for seeing the board in the mind's eye? Visualizing the board and the moves being made is something which it's really hard to find learning resources for 1,200 players, 1,200 rated.
You know what? I just sometimes, and I sometimes think that my calculation and visualization, especially when you play over the board chess, the higher stakes the game is. I'm probably, because I'm a bad loser sometimes, and this has affected my dad as well. And that's why he gave up chess at some point. He would keep thinking about a game that he lost or even won, and he wouldn't sleep. And I think that also helps train your visualization and calculation. Being a bad loser can actually help train your visualization. You can't get games out of your head, basically, or reading books, trying to read notation increasingly without a set, or looking at analysis. I think, or solving puzzles online can help visualization. But I think higher stake games have this role because you're doing a lot of soul searching, and you also, like, if you're like me, you're not able to sleep after, and you're analyzing a lot of variations in your head, and sometimes I remember one of my early tournaments, Halifax. When I was about 147 BCF. There was the British Chess Federation rating, not ECF. That was later. But I remember Rayner going by car with Rayner, and we were having a blindfold game, and he was sort of impressed. This was years back with my visualization. I think I have had it from an early age, so I'm not really sure how I got it, except maybe I was a bad loser or something. I just maybe I was calculating a lot more after games had finished. I'm not entirely sure how that occurred. Maybe also reading books. If you can't be bothered to get a chess set out, sometimes reading books a bit without a chessboard can help visualization. Yeah, there are many different ways. I think the conventional way is just solving tactical puzzles online, like the harder and harder ones, and try not to guess the move, but try and see the whole solution and variations, and resourcefulness from the opponent as well. The more you can do that all in advance, then that would simulate a real game. Because in a real game, you're not guessing the next move; you have to be able to follow it up. So I think the more you do take seriously, solving a puzzle, not just quantity but quality. So you try and make sure you've got all the variations worked out in your head before you commit to that next move in that puzzle training thing. I think that would be good as well.
Yeah, which is why a lot of people recommend using books, puzzle books, even if it's a similar level. The fact of having a pen and paper, like Grandmaster Jakob Agard says, you have to do it in a book, and better with a chess set. But even if it's just working from the book, the fact of writing down the answer and writing down multiple moves, and actually this is what FM Peter Giannatos was saying about his new Ultimate Chess workbook. It sort of forces a mechanism of accountability that is harder to come by if you're just clicking buttons on the tactics trainers, which of course are great resources if you can be disciplined. A couple other recommendations for Jim and anyone interested in the same topic as Jim. I've mentioned these before, but just give a quick plug to Benedictine's Visualize courses on Chessable. They're kind of unique in that they show you a position, and then they'll say, okay, black played pawn takes pawn, white played pawn takes pawn, black played knight f3. Where's the tactic there? So instead of looking at the tactic in the given position, he's forcing you to look ahead a move or two and find a tactic in a move further down the road. And Benedictine has like a bunch of those so that they get progressively harder as you go. And then I often recommend Step 2, Thinking Ahead, from the Chess Step series. So that's like a $10 book with all these sort of visualization puzzles. But as Trifon says, anyone who learned chess younger, it comes easier to them. So Jim, I know it can be daunting, and it takes a lot of work. It's kind of like learning a language as an adult. It's just tough, but you've got to lay the foundation first. So stick with it. But certainly, I know it's a struggle, and even little stuff like the chess.com board trainer, I think I mentioned before, just clicking on the square just so that you can become as facile as you possibly can with at least like being able to identify a square quickly. Stuff like quizzing yourself on how a knight gets from h1 to a8 without looking at a board. There's lots of stuff you can do, but it's all hard work, unfortunately.
Oh,
Go on.
but I would like to point out something from my tactics course, and I did notice this really helped me for solving puzzles. When you're looking to prioritize forcing moves, that does help you see further ahead because there's less branches. But I think to see the opportunities at every half move, so I call this like weakness of the last move. So as an example, if a knight moves from G1 to F3, if it's in a game, you might say, well, the knight has neglected E2 and H3. So visually, those squares should really light up. Can a rook come to E2? Can a queen come to A2 or H3? Because these are the golden opportunities in the analysis which emerge dynamically. That weakness of the last move, I call killer common squares. You've got to look out for the cooperation. So you've got bishop on A8 looking at G2. Can you get a rook to look at G2? You know, common squares, they usually win games, basically. And also the liberational effects, especially pawns, if they move in the center, all of a sudden, hold on, this rook's looking over there, this bishop's looking over there. So those three things I've actually called like three golden principles, and it's really helped me to solve any puzzles. That when you look ahead, basically, weakness of the last move, killer common squares, liberational effects. I've talked about those as the three golden principles that I use and still use, but that's within the context of prioritizing forcing moves. Because as I say, I think you'll be wearing yourself out if you do try and look at all these branches which might never happen. So I think, look, for most people, I think looking at forcing variations as a priority, awareness, no, not always to play forcing moves, but to be aware at least of the forcing variations, I think is gonna boost people's rating significantly. But paying attention to those golden opportunities at every half move or play, that what has actually occurred here. This bishop's gone from E4 to H1, so it's not controlling this square and this square. So you look at those golden opportunities, and that seems to serve me very well at the faster time limits online, at least in casual play.
Yeah, it's a great point about sort of looking at what you leave behind with every move. It's especially important, obviously, with pawn moves. But as you say, even with piece moves, whatever square was covered might not be covered anymore. Now, I noticed, Trifon, in hearing you describe your course, that you've sort of developed a language around it. Is that something that comes naturally to you, or do you work at that to try to make the material more accessible?
I think as a programmer, I think I won the Lloyd's Under 18 in 1989, and I think I was trying to program myself to play better and better chess. The problem is, for years, I don't think I was getting anywhere. I basically had this idea. I'll treat the pieces like resources, and in that tournament, I thought, okay, I'll try and use my best resources around the opponent's king, and as a sort of formula. And unfortunately, I don't think I really improved in rating. I did win that tournament. I didn't improve in rating significantly. In recent years, I'm more about more. I realize chess is super rich as a game, and more treating chess for me now as sort of downsides, exploiting downsides. That's my kind of new formula. But it's like I've treated chess as a kind of maybe an exercise in finding some formula, but there isn't. Chess is such a rich game, and that's what makes it so beautiful, that you can't formularize, you can't find this golden thing. There is advice, but it's all dependent on the position. As I say, it all depends. But it's very, very hard game, but that's what makes it so beautiful and challenging. If it was like noughts and crosses, then forget it. There wouldn't be all these thousands, millions of books and stuff. So that's what also makes chess beautiful. It's so challenging. You can't really create your own kind of formulas, but probably what I did find useful, I did put into the tactics thing, which do seem concretely useful and less controversial, more what I call they would scale up to stronger and stronger opponents. Because if you do improve your accuracy on puzzles, then if you were in that position even against a GM, you should still be able to win if you play the right combination. So there is stuff which is what I call like scalable to any opponents. Yeah. So I think to look out for that as well, that, sometimes one learns bad habits from, say, blitz chess, and you will never really improve. When stronger opponents, they'll bypass whatever worked at some level, and it's not scalable. So you're going to have stuff which is like scalable to whatever opponent, ideally. But on the faster time limits, you might take those risks anyway and not really care if you lose, as long as you have a fun game. That's another approach as well.
Yeah, and hearing you describe you were stuck for a while, and now, as you mentioned, you're pushing new bullet highs. Now, bullet is obviously sort of its own animal when it comes to chess improvement. A lot of it is just like reflexes, sort of chess reflexes, but it's still impressive for a 50-year-old to attain a new high, especially someone who's longtime bullet addict, played for many years.
Hmm.
So, what do you attribute your recent success, Trifon?
I think Tao's made me more aware. I think it's like doing a more systematic, finessed investigation. When I say about weakness of the last move, for example, it seems, in one Tao game, it's ridiculous. The opponent moves a rook to take a knight from c8, taking on c3. And it seems to me Tao's really factored in the rook's just weak in f8, and there's some other subtle stuff going on, and he manages to exploit the F8 somehow. And I think he's totally wired in to any type of weakness of the last move. If it's a self deflection, basically, that'd be like a self deflection, as if you deflected it, but they did it themselves, or a self pin, or self unprotected piece, any type of self destruct move. He seems to be completely wired in to that. The Tartakower quote that the blunders are all there waiting to be made.
Right.
So it's like he's created this infrastructure, massive infrastructure, for tapping into that complexity as a weapon. In programming, it's like the opposite philosophy nowadays. When you program computers, your code's meant to be readable, simple to understand. The complexity is like, should be zero. You shouldn't have any complexity. But Tao's using complexity as a weapon, and he's creating these, the blunders are all waiting to be made, and he's totally wired in, it seems, to exploit them. So he's made more acutely aware. But also, soft spots. What I found really strange is that from any opening, even the English opening or Queen's Pawn, Queen's Gambit, whenever he does a move like Queen C2 or Queen B3, don't think of that as positional. He's thinking about H7 all the time
Right.
after B6. All the soft spots. Basically, it's like he's looking, those hot spots are really hot in his mind. I'm getting the impression now that the hot spots around the game, anything where there's something expensive, like the king or the queen protecting something else, Tal is ready to dismantle that, undermine that, get rid of the defender. He's totally on the ball, basically, for hot spots, for weakness of the last move, making sure that he considers it a crime to draw with white. So quite often he'd have a disadvantage. Even in the World Championship of 1960, one of his favorite moves, this F4 move, he'll have a positional disadvantage, but it avoids this line where he'd have exchanged queens. If the queens come off, there's less complexity, less problems for the opponent to solve. Botvinnik couldn't solve the problems, couldn't refute this F4, and eventually played this disastrous move, and rook takes A6 later in one of the classic games. But you can see sometimes he's even willing to trade off, positional aspects of position to get the complexity, and he's totally with it to exploit those blunders when they are made. I think it's a bit like Lasker, and Lasker apparently he was impressed by Lasker. The funny thing about Lasker, by the way, every time I put Lasker into the Lichess engine, Lasker was incredibly accurate. I couldn't believe it. Is Lasker computer accurate or something? So that's like one of the next players I do want to investigate, actually, because I think that the old masters, that you don't have so much technical opening theory. You can learn the ideas, the ingenuity a lot more freely from the old masters. That's why I love looking at them. I like to look at Lasker and Alexander Alekhine actually next, among other players.
Yeah, I recently, Dan Heisman had tweeted out, Ken Regan wrote this paper that's about 6 or 7 years old. I am Ken Regan, who of course has been on the show, is an expert of computer chess, where he evaluated the rating strength of various world championship matches. And it was like 2400s through the 1800s. But then, like around the time of Lasker, there was like this leap of hundreds of points. He was just like leaps and bounds stronger than even peers that played within his lifetime. And then from there, everyone sort of maintained that level going forward from Capablanca on down. But it was just amazing to see just like kind of the leap forward that chess made in that period. Now, a couple follow-ups, because it's fun hearing you sort of wax philosophical about Mikhail Tal and Lasker and stuff. So seeing sort of Tal's instinctive attacking style, you think that helps you even in 1 minute chess?
I try and play generally as if it's a long game and just faster. I think that's something Andrew Tang has mentioned. Just play it as you're a normal game but faster. But there are certain moments if you're playing against people that seem to be out to win on time, you've got to keep a certain pace. But one of the things, if you can knock them out with a checkmate, then they can't win on time, can they? You end the war by checkmate. You only win a battle when you win material. So if you do try and checkmate them, but my style, because it's more about checkmating, so maybe I might be doing better against those. Otherwise, I'd lose on time if I was trying to win a pawn on the queen side. In a bullet game, I've only got like 2 seconds left. Okay, I've won the pawn, but I'm going to lose on time. It's good to sometimes go for the king. So maybe my style fits, going for the king, just in case you are playing something that's significantly faster at a fast time control. But I also like super blitz as well. It's not just like.
And what was your Lee chess bullet? It was 25, 2600. I'm trying to remember the exact.
Something, yeah. It's
amazing.
It's in some tournament, but in the recent Lee chess titled, I came ranked 50. I was really happy. I beat 4 GMs along the way and quite a few IMs. Yeah, I was pleased with that as well. But a lot of that, there is win probability factored in. Sometimes you just need to pre-move though in bullet.
Yeah,
that's that. As I say, win probability for me is the header strategy. Anything else is subservient to it. If you're playing someone, for example, in a normal game, and you know that they're a dragon expert, it's a ceiling dragon expert, they know everything about the ceiling dragon. Maybe you want to play the Smith or a Gambit. Maybe you want to change. You don't want to go into the dragon. You don't want to enter the dragon. So you do things generally to try to avoid the opponent's mega strengths and show their weaknesses up. I think everyone is aware of increasing their win probability. But maybe they can be more consciously aware of that. But I definitely see that in these great players.
Huh. Very, very interesting stuff, Trifon. And when you research someone like Tal, or you mentioned Lasker might be next, are you generally reading books about them, or you just kind of dig into the database or chessgames.com?
I found I like looking at the shorter games actually because, the Fischer course was I was looking just at Fischer's wins, no matter how much the length. The problem with that for me now, looking back, is, and I'm working on this Tal course at the moment, I prefer the shorter games because sometimes those Fischer games, they are grinds, they are sport, they are trying to wear the opponent out, like 70s, 80s, they are literally trying to use exhaustion to sometimes win. So if you pick on shorter games, generally, looking at the wins, not the losses of these like favorite players, I think they have a more intense tactical content, and you can see, like when I say like short games, like less than 25 moves, there's a blunder there which you can kind of inspect, draw some conclusions, maybe a takeaway point or two to yourself. So I like the short games. It feels more like a continuous learning model. You can go on to another game after. You might be able to cover 5 or 6 such games in a day potentially. A sort of morning workout with a few hours. I just like the short games now as well. That's, I think, the tactical intensity and the blunders that you can learn from, how they happened, and maybe some of the opening theories are also interesting at the time. And it's still relevant today, for Tal, some of the openings. But he will play anything, even from an English opening, somehow he gets attacks from it. It's remarkable. That is magical as well as his magical tactics, how he can go from a positional opening and have this crazy attack later.
Excellent. And so are you going to do a Udemy course on Tal, or is it a YouTube series, or what are you?
I think before the end of this month it should be released. This course on Tal. Yeah, I've been studying some.
Excellent. Yeah. So something else for listeners and viewers to keep an eye out. And we've covered most of the topics I had in mind, Trifon. But you had mentioned that you played Demis Hassabis, of course, the creator of Alpha Zero, and a very strong chess player in his own right, although he's mostly gone on to world-changing things. What was your experience like playing him as when you guys were kids?
He's an absolute genius. I remember, sometimes we did play blitz against each other. We were playing Peter Large once, who was one of the dominant international masters. Peter Large was winning all of these like Sunday quick plays, and we were in consultation, and Peter Large was killing us. An international master like Large, it was just killing us. The gap is just gigantic. You know, we were just enthusiasts. But he did play in the British Championship and did well. You know, he was a great player, and he in one of his interviews. It's quite funny. The funny one that I don't know if you've checked out one of the reasons he kind of, I think, mentions for staying away from chess. He had this grueling 10-hour game or something, and then he blundered at the end, and his opponent was really excited to win, and he had this epiphany. Hang on, there's all these people in the tournament hall. This is a complete waste of brains. And yeah, I think it was. I think I can understand that perspective. I think modern. I'm not totally a fan of one-day chess because there's so much good content as a consumer nowadays. If you look on YouTube, you can get an understanding of so many different things. I'm more of a casual player. I like my online chess and to check out channels like 42 or Half as Interesting, or science channels, math channels. Just get different understanding of different domains. I think it makes for me. I like to be a bit more well rounded, and the IT things on YouTube are good. Go to conferences is one of them. There's lots of IT channels, and sometimes the principles do seem a little bit relevant to chess. Sometimes as well. But yeah, Demis Hassabis was a fantastic player. He could have easily become an IM or GM, but when you write software, as Bill Gates said, once you do a program, it can be there and work a million times. When you play chess, you have to be there in the performance. It's you that's hard coded in the performance. So the beauty of writing software, I think, is that you can do systems and then they stand without you being there. And I do like programming computers a bit, and quite a bit from that angle. To have to do a performance all the time is a bit like torture, increasingly. So I like writing software as well. It's good fun. I can understand why he got into and he did absolutely fantastic things. And also, of course, the Stockfish NN version I've been using to study the masters does seem a lot more relaxed about losing material. That neural network angle has been incorporated in Stockfish, so it's much more dynamic and far-sighted than it ever has been. So it's a great time to revisit with that neural network technology, which was influenced by DeepMind for the Leela project. It's all been great. The open source movement there for these engines, which are so powerful nowadays, you can revisit these old master games and find amazing new variations, no one's even mentioned before, and draw some new conclusions, like about form pawns and patterns. I like seeing some new patterns which really haven't been, mentioned before, strategies. So that's interesting as well.
Yeah, and Tal's a good one to revisit in that vein because he played so freely. He was so anti-materialistic, which of course is how the engines play without the heavy psychological dose that Tal injected. And hearing you talk about sort of the importance or your own passion for lots of topics outside of chess, and obviously Demis Hassabis, the world is better, that he went on to find the company DeepMind that created AlphaZero. You did mention in a message to me you use the word addiction for Bullet. Now, obviously, it's great that you're doing that. You're making new highs, but are there periods where you just feel like you can't stop playing? I mean, I've certainly been there, and I'm not even part of the reason I don't really play Bullet is because when I do, I can't stop.
Oh well, on Lichess, I like, if I've got time, I like playing in the daily Bullet, and then I like playing in the daily Super Bullet straight after that. And I've amassed quite a number of tournament points. I'm actually quite high on the leaderboard for tournament points. So this has happened for the last few years. It seems I do get addicted to. But before that, remember there was Chess Cube before that. But I think Chess Cube, unfortunately, because it used that Flash technology, Flash had some security issues. It was going downhill as a technology. So Lichess was a great kind of alternative for me at the time, so I'm very, very glad because Bullet chess for me is also it is a lot about intuition, And I don't think it's an accident that Magnus Carlsen and the other grandmasters, sometimes they're very, very good at bullet compared to others. I think more about intuition rather than calculation. To me, calculation sometimes, even if you do prioritize forcing moves, it feels more like hard work. With bullet, I think it's more, you can get away with a lot more, you can play a lot more dodgy stuff, a lot more dodgy openings, and just have a lot, a great deal of fun. So yeah, because it's actually, I feel a bullet tournament is a bit like a holiday, actually, compared to playing on a long time control. A 5-minute tournament is like a lot of work to me compared to playing a bullet
That's
tournament.
funny.
Basically, bullet's like going on holiday to me, a bullet tournament.
Yeah, and the intuition is important with a lot of sort of these invisible type chess moves, these puzzles where like the hardest part might be just having a move occur to you. If it's like putting your queen somewhere where, like Fischer's queen f4 that we mentioned earlier, like once you see the move, it's a simple tactic, but you have to be willing to put your queen somewhere right next to the king where it can just be taken, in order to sort of lure the king further out. But anyway, Trifon, I feel like we've covered most of the major topics. Anything else you wanted to mention before we wrap up?
No, that's great. Thank you so much for this interview. I really enjoyed it. And I really enjoy your podcast generally. It's great. Thank you so much for everything
Oh,
you
my
do.
pleasure. It's been a lot of fun, and I do want to mention a couple things since we've decided we're gonna, if there's no technical issues, share this on your YouTube channel. Number one, for anyone watching on video, we just moved my home office, so the reason the room's a total wreck is I haven't put it together yet. So I got my Paul Morphy poster up, but nothing else is set up yet, and I wasn't really thinking because normally Perpetual Chess is an audio only podcast, and for anyone coming from Trifon's channel, I encourage you could subscribe on YouTube, and there are video renderings where it's just a squiggly line and our voices. But generally, the way people listen is on the podcast apps, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, etc. But if you enjoyed this interview, please check us out. And Trifon, on that note, please keep up the excellent work. And it's been a fun trip down chess history lane and chess content history lane chatting with you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.